Hi, I'm Terry Robinson, Associate Editor at SC Magazine, and coming to you today from Nasdaq, where we're talking about securing the Internet of Things. Here with me is Miller Newton. He's the President and CEO of PKWare. Hey, how are you doing this morning?
I'm well, thank you, Terry. Thanks for having me.
Great. So let's talk about the Internet of Things for a bit and talk about encryption. Obviously, everyone is talking about encryption these days and the importance of doing it. So why don't you share some of your thoughts with me about encryption and then how it can be done and how to get everybody on board?
Sure. It's a big topic, and encryption is one of those things it's really complicated and pretty misunderstood. But let's talk just for a second about kind of what's going on and what's happening with this epidemic level of security breaches that we're seeing. Okay. Most companies and federal agencies, for that matter, have focused security on the perimeter and keeping the bad guys out. And 90% of enterprise spend on security is around protecting the perimeter, and yet again, we're seeing these security breaches at epidemic levels. So the first thing that people, consumers and companies need to do is just make the realization that there are adversaries on our systems and in our networks today, and that's going to continue. We'll never be able to keep them out. So the only way to solve the problem is if you armor the data itself and render it useless when these adversaries do get to it. And that's how you have to solve the problem.
And that's encryption then?
That is through encryption.
Okay, great. So, that's interesting because we are seeing these alarming data breaches. And we are seeing that concentration on keeping people out, but they're in there, and they're hard to get out anyway. I mean, once they're in, and they can lie in wait for a really, really long time before they try to do anything, right? So what are some first steps for? We can talk about it at the IT level and then also at the personal level. But what at the enterprise level, what are some first steps that companies should be taking here?
Sure. It's not about the algorithms. That's not the hard part of encrypting or protecting information. It's really about the user experience. And encryption's not going to become pervasive in companies if you require the users to take an extra step to encrypt information. They'll avoid it. So the first thing companies need to do is really be cognizant of no change in the user workflow or experience. Okay. The second thing that I think historically has kept encryption from happening more in companies is the key management associated with encrypting a file was also very complicated. And the key management has to be done at the application level layer so that it is also seamless to the end user. Okay. So those two things are kind of the key elements of encryption.
Okay, great. So what happens now with the Internet of Things? We have a hard time sort of securing what we have already, and encryption is a novelty to some at this point in time, but bring the Internet of Things into that, and what are the challenges there?
Yeah, so let's start with just the consumer awareness of what's going on. And with all of these Internet-connected devices, they're streaming sensitive personal information up to the cloud, which is not secure, and it's happening, every time you turn on or plug in the device. And consumers just aren't aware of the fact that it's collecting that information and sending it to some server someplace that's not secure. Right. So that realization is really important. Some recommendations for the consumer in terms of the Internet of Things: do your research on the device. And check specifically for security concerns and issues before you make the purchase of one of these internet-connected devices. I think the second thing is, very simply, if you are given a notification to update the software on these devices, pay attention to the notification and do the updates because frequently those updates do have security bug fixes in them. So keep your devices current is another recommendation. I think number 3 is don't put them on your personal network, put it on a guest network. So have it connect to the internet through a different router.
Okay.
So you're not kind of converging all of your personal email and banking information and all your other stuff with the information going to the cloud through these devices. So those three things, I think, are kind of the start of how people can start to solve the problem.
So that's some good advice on securing the Internet of Things from Miller Newton, who's the president and CEO of PKWare. And thank you for joining us today. Stay tuned for some more news from Nasdaq here today in New York.